Assalamu alaikum and welcome to the next session, which is on the global economic outlook. Ladies and gentlemen, please do come in, take a seat, make yourselves comfortable. The front row is completely empty and we want to see lots of eager faces in front of us. We have a great set of panelists for you to discuss how do we make the global economy more resilient? How especially do we make developing countries and emerging markets more robust in the face of economic uncertainty? We have some great panelists up ahead to chew over these issues. First, though, let me introduce you to our keynote speaker. Ladies and gentlemen, come on in, sit in the front. We're eager to...
اجلسوا لو سمحتم يسرنا وجودكم معنا والمتحدثون يأتون من
Please put your hands together to welcome Minister Mohammed.
Thank you, Nisha. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I see many still coming in. I'm still waiting about a couple of hundred more to come in before I begin my speech. Moderator, Excellencies, distinguished panelists, I want to begin by thanking the WIEF for inviting me to address you today. Since its inception in 2005, the WIEF has emerged as a premier forum for Muslim countries to discuss how to empower their economies through increasing trade and business opportunities. It is heartening that this forum is gaining traction even outside the Muslim world. The theme of this year's forum, Innovative Partnerships for Economic Growth, emphasizes the need for close collaboration among Muslim countries as we continue to address the changing global economic landscape together so that the Muslim world can once again be a global force for peace, progress, and prosperity. Ladies and gentlemen, the Islamic world today is full of paradoxes and contradictions. Despite being resource-rich, we are economically poor and weak. While some of us live amidst plenty, the majority of the Ummah live in abject poverty. While there are many breakthroughs in science and technology, for most of the Muslim Ummah, the condition is one of widespread ignorance and backwardness. This is in stark contrast to the golden age of Islam, which was a period of temporal as well as spiritual achievement, an age of expansion and brilliance. The kind of development espoused by Islam focuses on the realization of socio-economic justice and al-falah, or well-being of everyone. Within the realm of Islamic economy, the institution of Waqf, for example, plays a very important role where wealthy Muslims provide essential services to society in ensuring that these development objectives are achieved. A powerful tool indeed, as we wrestle today with rapidly increasing economic inequality, where the wealth of the world is literally divided into two, half going to the richest 10%, the other half to the remaining 90%. Ladies and gentlemen, according to an IMF report, the three most striking characteristics of economic growth in the 20th century are: one, the staggering size of the world population that has expanded from 1.6 billion more than many years ago to 7 billion people today, acceleration of wealth generation, and uneven distribution of wealth among countries and regions of the world. The technological progress that the world has experienced today would not have been possible without the mathematical and scientific knowledge pioneered by Muslim scholars more than 6 centuries ago, such as Jabir ibn Hayyan, generally known as the father of chemistry, Al-Khwarizmi for algebra, Abul Wafa al-Buzjani for geometry and trigonometry, and Thabit ibn Qura, the founder of statistics. As a result, the Muslims were able to develop and extract wealth from their lands, and through trade were able to strengthen their economies, protect their people, and enable them to practice the Islamic way of life, ad-Din. Today, regretfully, Muslim countries are still grappling with issues of poverty and social unrest created by political instability. Ladies and gentlemen, let me now offer some thoughts on how we can overcome some of these challenges. Firstly, cooperation, of course, which is the theme of this conference, this forum, is essential. We have to look beyond arbitrary borders and instead consider ourselves as one tangible critical mass, united by similarities in goals, values, and aspirations. Secondly, we must channel our differences into efforts to rediscover Islamic economic principles based on the Al-Quran and Sunnah of the Prophet and developing adaptations to current needs. This, of course, is not a new idea. In Malaysia, my country, Malaysia, we have many success stories. Tabung Haji, for example, is an institution set up in 1959 that manages the Hajj pilgrims for the Malaysian Ummah. It has grown from strength to strength in terms of depositors and resources. Islamic banking is yet another area where Malaysia has evolved to be a world leader. Thirdly, we need to promote regional cooperation. We are champions of cooperation through regional economic integration. Malaysia is an active player in ASEAN, a regional grouping of 10 countries. In 2015, ASEAN will become a strong single market through the ASEAN Economic Community. Malaysia is proud to assume the chairmanship of ASEAN when this happens. ASEAN will be one of the most dynamic and fastest growing regions in the world in about a decade. Fourthly, it is important to stress that political stability is essential to achieve economic progress. Make no mistake, the threat to world peace and security is not Islam, but extremism, intolerance, violence, and militancy. There is no way that Muslim countries can ever become prosperous as long as we remain wrecked by conflict, sectarianism, and the marginalization of minorities and women. In light of this, the call by Malaysian Prime Minister Datuk Seri Najib to the global movement of moderates to counter extremism and religious intolerance is more relevant now than ever before. The best investment we can make in fighting extremism and addressing marginalization, as he said this morning, as he said today, is in education. This has been recognized as a great facilitator of social mobility and equality, which in turn leads to more just societies. Ladies and gentlemen, Malaysia is ready to share the experience we have gained throughout the years in promoting economic growth and social justice. In our 50-year journey, we have transformed from an agricultural to a more diversified and resilient economy. More than 20 years ago, we launched our ambitious Vision 2020 to be for a Malaysian society that is infused by strong moral and ethical values, living in a society that is democratic, liberal and tolerant, caring, economically just and equitable, progressive and prosperous, and in full possession of an economy that is competitive, dynamic, robust, and resilient. Achieving Vision 2020 is not possible without economic, social, and government transformation. So 4 years ago, we introduced the new economic model to be achieved through the government and economic transformation programs, which will propel Malaysia to being an advanced nation with inclusiveness and sustainability by the year 2020. Through public and private investments and public and private sector collaboration, as well as the creation of job opportunities, especially for our youth, we have been able to promote a more inclusive society. We are on track to achieve developed nation status by the year 2020 to be a high-income economy. High incomes are important, but we are especially mindful of the need to achieve a more equitable society through an inclusive and sustainable growth. Let us dedicate our efforts so that more Muslim countries can join the ranks of the developed world, as articulated by the President of IDB today in his speech, Dr. Ahmad Muhammad Ali. Once again, I wish to thank WIEF for giving me this opportunity to speak to you. The WIEF has been a very important and excellent forum for the sharing of best practices and new ideas. I hope you will have a very productive forum and a good time here in Dubai. Thank you. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Thank you so much, Minister Mustafa, for getting us going to a cracking start. Let me now introduce you to our eminent panelists. Panelists, do join me up on the stage. We have from Japan, Mr. Atsutoshi Nishida, who is advisor to the board of Toshiba Corporation. To people from Dubai, this next panelist needs no introduction. His Excellency Hisham El-Sharawi is chairman of the Economic Zones World Dubai, also vice chair of the Dubai Chamber of Commerce. And we have an economic guru from the UK, Roger Bootle, who I've interviewed many a time, managing director of Capital Economics. Welcome to you. Now, the eagle-eyed amongst you might notice that we have one empty seat, and why is that? Because very soon we hope we will be joined by Datuk Ranjit Ajit Singh, who is the Executive Chairman of the Securities Commission of Malaysia, but who is signing a very important MOU with the Securities Commission of Abu Dhabi as we speak. So as soon as the signing ceremony is over, hopefully he will be arriving and he will beetle across the stage and he won't need an introduction, ladies and gentlemen. So, are we ready now to cast our eyes over the economic horizon? What does it look like? Well, all of us know that the headlines have not been very encouraging recently. The Economist screamed, "World economy not in good shape," only last week. The IMF has been warning us to expect mediocre growth for the foreseeable future, at least until the end of the decade. So how do we make sure that our countries, our businesses, our regions, our enterprises are amongst the winners, are the resilient and the robust ones in this rather sober economic time? That's the question I'm going to ask our panelists, and I'd like to start by asking Mr. Atsutoshi Nishida, advisor to the board of Toshiba Corporation, to give us a manufacturing perspective on how to make sure that you can build in some resilience. Nishida-san, the floor is yours.
In order for the Islamic economic zone to continue to develop while maintaining economic sovereignty, it is important to create new industries through cooperation between Islamic countries and to develop social infrastructure that improves people's living standards. In constructing this kind of resilient social model, it is necessary to create mechanisms that are able to generate continuous economic development. From the viewpoint of demographics, in the Islamic countries, the trend is to an increase in the working age population. This backdrop of an abundant labor force provides the potential for realizing continuous economic development. Three major requirements must be met in order to achieve this sustainable economic development. The first is education. This provides the foundation for medium to long-term development. The second is energy. It goes without saying that this is the engine of economic and social life. Energy usage in the 21st century, however, differs completely from that of the past, as there is now a need to consider resource conservation and environmental preservation at the same time. And the third is working to improve the quality of healthcare by making use of ICT technology so that people can be healthy and live safe and secure lives. First of all, regarding education, in order to make effective and beneficial use of the abundant labor resources in the Islamic economic zone, governments should be promoting platforms to help people learn technologies and get skills training. In Japan, JITCO, we call JITOCO, the Japan International Training Corporation Organization, is working to contribute to skill training for functional education in emerging markets. I have the honor to serve as the chairman of this organization. This organization accepts 50,000 trainees a year, and so far has provided training for over 800,000 people for more than 20 years. In the future, I want to strongly promote programs for trainees from the Islamic economic zone too. Turning to energy, we need to reduce greenhouse gas emissions first. With respect of the first reducing greenhouse gas emissions, quick and radical efforts are required. In order to contribute to the realization of a low-carbon society, Toshiba, my company, offers systems for ultra-supercritical thermal power generation that achieves the world's highest generating efficiency: nuclear power generation, hydroelectric power, geothermal power, solar power, and wind power generation. Toshiba is also participating in 36 smart community projects around the world. In terms of energy management, we are taking advantage of energy-saving technologies to achieve energy optimization not only in homes and buildings, but throughout the entire community, and to consistently achieve efficient energy use from the supply side right through to the demand side. In addition, if we consider things from the perspective of one of the key concepts of Islamic thought, halal, we find an emphasis on health, cleanliness, safety, and quality. If we apply this to urbanization, which makes progresses in parallel with economic development, I think there is a close affinity with the vision of the human smart community advocated by Toshiba. At the same time, when constructing social infrastructure for smart, frugal communities in the Islamic economic zone, you should be utilizing renewable energy, developing high-quality water and sewage systems, constructing smart buildings with energy management system and energy-saving equipment. In addition, robust information security systems are also essential in order to protect private medical records. At Toshiba, we are developing security systems for communications networks and data that are theoretically undecodable using quantum cryptography as the ultimate security code based on the uncertainty principles of physics. This technology will be commercialized shortly. From the perspective of safe and secure life, it is also important to be prepared for natural disasters, which are becoming more frequent and more serious in recent years. At Toshiba, we have developed the new solid-state weather radar system that is able to detect a variety of heavy rain, and have just received an order for this from India's meteorological agency. At Toshiba, we believe that the construction of human smart community represents the way to generate long-term global development in the 21st century, and we would very much like to contribute to constructing them in the Islamic economic zone. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Nishida. Please come and take a seat. So investment is the way to create a more robust society, investment in your people, in education, in healthcare, and quantum cryptography. I didn't expect physics to be mentioned in the course of this afternoon. Let's find out how Dubai has made itself more resilient after taking a very nasty shock in the 2008 financial crisis. It now finds itself in an altogether better place. How did it do that? Mr. Hisham Al-Shirawi is going to enlighten us. Your Excellency.
In the name of God, the merciful, the compassionate, may peace be upon the most noble of his messengers and his family and his followers.
Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Nishida talked about a very sophisticated model that is being implemented in order to create a better future for us. I'm here just to give you an example of how we in Dubai did it. and created a resilient system within a short period of time. Of course, the credit we usually attribute it to one generation, but it has been the work of many generations. It's interesting that we are discussing the development of a resilient model for developing economies. And we have the model of Dubai. Because the UAE, and especially Dubai, we are quite a resilient model for development. It's a model that has stood the test of time and transformed Dubai from a sleepy outpost on the Gulf to one of the most dynamic and resilient economies of the world. An economy that has weathered the global economic meltdown of the recent past and have emerged stronger of it. Dubai has the characteristics of a simple developing economy: a low income, low GDP, poor healthcare, and limited education. But within one generation, Dubai transformed itself into one of the most influential cities of the world by putting in place the fundamentals of economic developments, focusing on the raising standard of living for its people and opening up the world and become a hub for trade and commerce. HSBC's Trade Confidence Index had ranked UAE as the #1 in terms of confidence of economy. Dubai has an airport that is ranked second in the world. It's the second busiest airport in the world, which has close to 70 million passengers in 2013. And only in the first 9 months of this year, we had 52.6 million passengers. So we expect 2014 for us to surpass the figure of 70. Dubai Duty Free has the largest airport retailer sales in the world, with $1.8 billion of sales. And the latest edition of Dubai Air Show had marked a record $206 billion worth of booked orders for exhibitors. And Jebel Ali Seaport had launched its Terminal 3, the largest semi-automated facility in the world. Turning the supply and demand model on its head was Dubai's trick. We have first created supply and then worked on demand. We first developed Jebel Ali Port while there was another port which had a capacity nearby, which was Port Rashid. Yet the vision of the leaders have led us to develop one of the ports, which is now currently the largest man-made port in the world and one of the busiest. The supply of Jebel Ali Port was then created by establishing the Jebel Ali Free Zone, which had brought more and more business to the port. Today, this economic powerhouse, the Jebel Ali Free Zone, generates approximately $90 billion in trade. Now, when you look at the size of Jebel Ali Free Zone and look at the size of Dubai, this is a mammoth number. According to PricewaterhouseCoopers study, that Jabza contributes to almost 20% of Dubai's GDP. Approximately 1 of every 16 Dubai residents work or have something to do with Jebel Ali Free Zone. Diversification is the key to developing a resilient economy, and so is for EZW. EZW, the parent company of Jabza, which also includes Technopark and Dubai Auto Zone, had announced the development of halal zones for companies specialized in the production of halal products. The initiative, in collaboration with the Dubai Islamic Economy Development Center, aims to establish Dubai as the Islamic economy capital of the world. In the field of e-commerce, Technopark has launched the world's first e-commerce hub that aims to bring together all key players in the e-commerce field under one ecosystem. In this way, ladies and gentlemen, Dubai has created not only a resilient economy, but one of the most busiest and friendliest environments in doing business in the world. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Al-Sharawi. So really diversifying its base the whole time, constantly trying to stay one step ahead, is really very much part of the Dubai DNA, as Ms. El-Sharawi just explained. Now, I'm going to ask our next speaker, Roger Bootle, to take a step away from the kind of detail that we've been hearing and give us a big picture, a global overview of the kind of economic expectations, really, that we should have. Roger, it's all yours.
Your Excellencies and distinguished delegates, it's a great pleasure for me to be asked to speak at this wonderful conference in this marvellous city of Dubai, which has achieved so much and which I so much admire. As you all know, the Islamic world is divided between those countries which already have a very high level of development and those which are still very much in the emerging market category. The way you have to make your progress in the next few years is going to be tricky because the world faces some major challenges. And I want to focus on some of the challenges that confront in particular the emerging market world before I say just a few words about other parts of the world economy. The emerging markets have slowed quite considerably over the last several years. That's not because they've used up the potential for rapid growth. Very far from it. If you look at the BRICS economies, Brazil, Russia, India and China, the famous four, and look at their incomes as a percentage of the US, you see what you already know, that they are way, way, way behind. This gap between the level of what we may term the frontier, that's to say the American level of GDP per capita, and the GDP per capita in these other countries, gives you a measure of the gap that exists, the potential that exists for catch-up growth. And frankly, it's enormous. Now, some of the emerging markets today are progressing fully in accordance with the extent of that potential for catch-up growth. But quite a few of them are not. It's interesting, you can compare countries in the developing world with counterparts in the past in terms of where they stood in relation to the scope for catch-up growth, which is what this chart tries to do. Again, I'm looking at the BRIC countries, and the country on the left is India. Countries in the past at India's stage of development, could I have that chart back, please? Countries in the past at India's stage of development have been able to achieve something like about 10% GDP growth. But India recently has been achieving only about 5%. Countries in the past at China's level of GDP in relation to the leader, the technological leader of the United States, have been achieving something like 8% growth per annum. And that's pretty much, actually, what China has been achieving. Now, despite all the fuss about the Chinese slowdown, China's the country which has actually been growing pretty much according to its potential, as given by the performance of other countries in the past. Brazil and Russia are also pretty disappointing. They're only growing at around about a half the potential rate as given by the performance of countries at their income level in the past. So some of what's going wrong in emerging markets is not that the growth potential has been exhausted. It's simply that for whatever reason, a series of domestic impediments are stopping those countries from growing as fast as they should. Now, I can illustrate that by reference to this chart, which shows the cost of exporting a shipping container in US dollars from a variety of different emerging market countries. And I've marked on members of the BRIC group in blue. Interestingly, the two on the left, that's to say where the costs of shipping a container are the highest, are Russia and Brazil. This is not something solely to do with the level of development or GDP or general costs in the economy. It's about efficiency. And you can see this by looking at the country that's right on the far right, the country with the lowest level of costs for shipping a container through its port. And that country is Singapore, which no one in their right mind can describe as a poor country or even an emerging market. It emerged a long time ago. So something that a lot of these countries are getting wrong is about the fundamental levels of efficiency in their economy. Now, the next thing that I have a chart, if the technology will allow, that I wish to illustrate is with regard to levels of investment in the economy. China, as we all know, invests about 50% of its GDP in fixed capital and equipment, a level that's far too high. But at the other end of the scale, there are a lot of emerging market countries which invest far too little, and they include, indeed, Brazil and Russia and South Africa. It's vitally important. The second basic to get right is to make sure that a sufficient proportion of national income is devoted to investment rather than simply to consumption. If you look at the slowdown in the famous 4 BRIC countries over the last few years, it has a very different explanation in those different countries. China's slowdown, in my view, is nothing to be particularly worried about. It's to be expected. It's the result of the tremendous progress that China has made so far. Its main task is to rebalance the economy away from over-reliance on fixed investment and exports towards consumption. For countries like Brazil, it's completely the opposite. The task is rather to cut back on consumption and boost investment. The key thing is to get the basics right. Countries need to get the structure of monetary and fiscal policy right, to enforce the rule of law and to combat corruption, to keep the role of the public sector in place and to ensure labour market flexibility. Now, these days we hear a lot, and we're probably going to hear a lot more shortly, about the inevitability of poor growth over the next few years. The new normal, people call it, or sometimes the new mediocre. Well, if I were you, I wouldn't set your sights that low. The people who use these phrases and talk so pessimistically are precisely the same people who a few years ago, before the world crash, thought everything in the garden was rosy and didn't see the crash coming at all. We would have done well not to have believed them then, and I think we would do well not to believe them now. Get the basics right, and there's no reason why Islamic countries in this region and elsewhere in the world, no reason why they cannot enjoy rapid rates of economic growth in the years ahead. Thank you very much.
So he's an optimist, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much. You took the very first question I was going to ask him. He's already...
هناك كثير من الأسئلة قد أجاب عليها، ولكنه بعد ذلك سوف يجيب على أي أسئلة إذا كانت لديكم. هكذا فالمقاعد في الخلف ليست فارغة. الدكتور سينغ وهو الرئيس التنفيذي لهيئة الأوراق المالية من ماليزيا، وهو أتى للتو. أهلا بك سيدي. السيدات والسادة، وهو ذاهب للمنبر أود أن أقول له إنه رئيس اللجنة المعنية بالأوراق المالية في المنظمة الدولية للأوراق المالية. شكرا نيشا. مساء الخير جميعا. أولا دعوني أعتذر لكم عن تأخري، ولكن هناك ظروف أدت إلى ذلك. يسرني أن أكون بينكم اليوم ويشرفني أن أكون هنا في دبي، ولقد تشاركت معكم في بعض الآراء بعد الظهر قبل هذه الجلسة. هناك عدة نقاط أود أن أضيفها إلى المناقشة. كما تعرفون فإن مناقشة اليوم تركز على النموذج البرازيلي للتنمية، وهناك الوقت لكي تتم الإصلاحات والإصلاحات الهيكلية. فبالرغم من معدلات النمو الكبيرة التي شهدتها بلدان مجموعة البريكس على سبيل المثال، فهناك كثير هي لا تزال دون مستوى النمو الاقتصادي المطلوب. هناك الموارد الطبيعية آخذة في النفاذ، ونحن دائما نفكر في موضوع النمو أو إيجاد النمط البديل للنمو. كيف يمكن أن يتم ذلك بصورة بناءة؟ فهنا علي أن أركز على بعض النقاط التي أراها ذات صلة وثيقة بالموضوع. أولا، لسنوات طويلة فإن كانت هناك معضلة أن الأسواق في الأسواق الحقيقية والأسواق المالية لابد من الاستثمار فيها، وكان من المفترض للأسواق في البلدان النامية أن تستمر في تطبيق نفس الأنماط ووسائل ومبادئ توزيع الحصص، وأخذا بعين الاعتبار أننا استخدمنا السياسات التقليدية، كان لابد أيضا من النظر في الظاهرة الكبيرة ألا وهي عدم المساواة. فبين 99 و2000 زادت الهوة بين الناس بمعدلات تزيد عن 16% أو 10%، وفي عام 2006 فإن 1% التي كانت تمثل 59% في زيادة الدخل، كان هناك زيادة في التعويضات والرواتب المقدمة لكبار الموظفين، أي أنه الأغنياء الذين يمثلون 1% كان لديهم تقريبا نصف أو ما يزيد عن نصف ثروة العالم أجمع. وهكذا كان هناك بالنسبة للحوافز على العمل الجاد، وكل ذلك لم تكن على المستوى المطلوب. لذلك فعلينا أن نستطيع القول إن هذه الثروة كانت قد تجاوزت بكثير النتيجة الطبيعية والعادية لتراكم الثروة في المجتمع، لأنها تراكمت لدى مجموعة بسيطة. ولذلك كان هناك مشكلة أيضا، وهي القيود على الحركة المجتمعية والتدفقات في المجتمع. هناك الأسر ذات الدخل المتوسط والصغير لم تكن تستطيع أن تنتج ما يكفيها للاستهلاك. وفي أمريكا مثلا فالأغنياء يشكلون 1%، ولم يكن من المفاجئ أن تظل تبعات الأزمة كامنة في المجتمع الأمريكي. وبالنسبة للمجتمع النامي فهذا أمر لابد أن نأخذ بعين الاعتبار. النمو هو رفاهية للمجتمع بشكل يدمج فيه الجميع، بشكل يمكن أن نحقق فرص العمل والفرص المختلفة في إطار ديناميكي ليكون فيه إشراك لشرائح واسعة من المجتمع. لابد أيضا أن ننظر في النمو المستدام الذي له علاقة أيضا بالزيادة في رأس المال، أن يكون هناك إدماج على الأمد البعيد للشرائح المختلفة للمجتمع والمشاركة المجتمعية الواسعة. كانت هناك جهود لابد أن تتعزز لكي تكون لدينا القدرة على توزيع نتائج هذا النمو بصورة منصفة لأفراد المجتمع. لابد أيضا أن نركز على إيجاد الحلول بعيدة الأجل. وهنا ملاحظة في الختام، أني أود أن أقول إن كثيرا من هذه العناصر والعمل التي نتحدث عنها فيما يتعلق بالتنمية المستدامة والإدماج تتعلق بمسألة الطلب، وأيضا المبادئ المالية التي لها صلة بين الشؤون المالية من ناحية والاقتصاد الحقيقي من ناحية أخرى، بما يؤدي إلى إمكانية التنمية المستدامة والإدماج. وهكذا فلا بد من تعزيز نمو العمل المصرفي والشؤون المالية الإسلامية، لأن هذا يعتبر من الضمانات الرئيسية للتنمية المستدامة.
Brilliant timing. He just walked on and did it like that. So So where should we start? I think how about with this point that Roger Bootle made, that actually maybe we shouldn't be so passive and just accept what the IMF is telling us, that we face years and years of mediocre growth. The new mediocre should be the new reality. Who agrees with that? Hisham al-Sharawi? Yes, I know you do. What do you reckon? Is the IMF being too pessimistic, or do we need to be more realistic?
No, I mean, pessimism is a recipe for failure. Pessimism results in lesser mental activity, blaming things on others and trying to escape and create or find a scapegoat. No, on the contrary. As a matter of fact, crises could be a blessing in disguise.
Crisis could be a blessing in disguise.
Could be, yes, because they create opportunities. They create opportunities for rectification. But can I just stop you there, Mr.
Al-Sharawi? Because we're not exactly in a crisis, are we, ladies and gentlemen? We had a crisis 6 years ago, and lots changed. But now we're kind of neither in a crisis nor in a go-go economy, right? We're sort of in a kind of okay, you know, doing all right, surviving. Is that the kind of situation in which people are really minded to grip reform and take bold steps?
Well, as a matter of fact, this is the best time because after the crisis, when it's during the crisis, it's very gloomy, it's very cloudy, there is lots of dust. Right now that the dust has settled, we could see our path in a lot more clearer way. We could measure what we have done wrong and then come up with solutions or certain rectification of the path so that we can select a better approach to the problems that we face. Also, right now, we should be optimistic because we have seen that most of the advices that we used to receive from the people whom used to call themselves the experts were actually futile. They weren't as correct. So no, I think this is not a bad period. On the contrary, I think people with the like minds, people who can manage their resources efficiently, and people who have a vision and patience will be able to use this time in order to create a better future for the generations to come.
Thank you. So I'm going to ask Mr. Nishida from Japan whether he can share that optimism. Ladies and gentlemen, you need no reminding that Japan has been in a kind of quagmire, a stagnant economy for the best part of 2 decades. The Abe government is trying to get them out of that and has tried various measures. Is Japan getting out of its long sleep now, Nishida-san?
I am not representing Japan, so I doubt whether I can give the right answer to you.
Give me your personal view. I mean, every Japanese person must be thinking about this,
From the viewpoints of industrial world, pessimism does not create anything new. In the 21st century, we had to just focus on growth, growth, growth. But in the 21st century, we have to achieve sustainable growth under the preservation of environment as well as limited natural resources. So this is a kind of trilemma. But we have to grow further, and in order to achieve that, sustainability, then without having optimism, we can't create anything new. Innovation, the continuous creation of innovation, as well as continuous enhancement of productivity, will be the keys to grow further. Japan is going to try to do that. Before, as you are very much aware of, Japan was involved, hopelessly in the bad trap of deflation for almost 20 years. How to get out of that was a key for all Japanese people to consider and also to implement that. Now, after Mr. Abe came in again, he tried to implement Abenomics. But the first arrow and the second arrow was already implemented, but the third arrow, which is the implementation of growth strategy, this is still left and down.
Yes, so that's
Okay.
still in the hope department.
So
isn't
everything
it?
depends upon how we can quickly and thoroughly implement new growth plan, growth strategy. This is the key for Japan. But economy itself is started to recover slowly. But I think the future for Japan is not 100% bright, but some bright light can be seen, by everybody.
It's a very diplomatic answer. Thank you. Not 100% bright, but there are some bright lights there. Ranjit Singh, I was surprised to hear you talk about the need for more sustainable growth models. Seeing as that you're responsible for securities markets regulation, right? And as a journalist, I look at securities markets and think that they are very far removed from sustainable growth and very far removed from the lives of ordinary people. So tell us more about that.
I think, well, that's precisely the reason why I think there needs to be a lot more focus towards, looking towards long-term financing. I mean, if you look at securities markets, I mean, clearly there is, if you take, for instance, the demands on infrastructure financing, for which, again, the figures are staggering. And we are looking at very significant amounts of investments required by developing economies, in fact, I dare say even advanced economies, actually, on infrastructure financing. Much of this financing, given the kind of reforms that have occurred post-GFC, are unlikely to come from the banking sector. And therefore, it's market-based financing that is actually going to provide a solution towards many of these long-term financing and investment objectives. And therefore...
But is it? Because so far it's been woefully lacking. So why do you have this faith that it will
Well, I think if you look at some of the areas, there are certainly areas for which enhancements have to be made. I mean, take the development of corporate bond markets and bond markets. In many developing economies, this is not yet at a level that would provide a sustainable financing solution for some of the infrastructure financing that is necessary. And unless you have that, you clearly create maturity mismatches, which can exacerbate in situations of crisis. And so, just picking up on the point that you were making before, my view is that I think this is the time for reforms, and I think we've learned from lessons from crisis, painful lessons emerging markets have had. 97, 98, and in those periods of time, many markets went through major crisis. They put in a lot of reforms, and I think some of the reforms have stood quite well when you've had the severe effect that has happened in the last few years, and therefore the ability to create infrastructure around markets, around stronger governance arrangements, etc. I think are the kind of reforms that have been put in place to be able to create more resilience in these markets.
Okay. Roger, you showed us a graph, unfortunately for only a short while, because the graph gremlin snatched it away, which was showing growth potential for the BRICS versus what they're actually achieving. And with the exception of China, which is pretty much on its growth potential curve, I think it was India, Russia, and Brazil, did you show? Were way below that potential. Yeah, which is very worrying, and it's not just those countries. In many emerging markets, growth now is much lower, at half the levels it was before the financial crisis. So my question is, given that there is this gap, what does that mean for the poorest? Because it's only when economic growth meets its potential that you really lift people out of poverty. Isn't that so?
Well, I think this is a disappointment, but it's not a disaster in the sense that even those emerging markets that are growing at disappointing rates are still growing quite fast. For India to be growing at 5% per annum, that is raising some people out of poverty in India, but not as fast as would be possible. If you look at what's happened in China, this is an extraordinary achievement over the last 20 or 30 years. And it's not just an achievement of bare, boring GDP stats, but in terms of people's ordinary living standards. And this, I think, is the legitimate criticism that can be levied against some emerging market governments, that by not realising the economic potential for their countries, they're simply failing their populations. They're failing to raise these people out of poverty fast enough.
So are you pessimistic, panelists, about this rebalancing that we've seen between the rich world and the developing world over the course of the last 15 years, that we can continue that momentum? Given that now the whole world is growing slower? I'll come back to you in a minute, Roger. Or do you think that there is still all to play for? Because hundreds of millions of people in dire poverty have been lifted out of it. Now, is that a one-off opportunity that we've lost? Hisham Al-Shirawi?
I would like, before answering your question, I would like to comment on the concept of growth. I mean, why do we keep on locking ourselves and creating this paradigm for ourselves, which called sustainable growth? I mean, we want to grow at 5% this year, and 5% next year, and 10% the year after. So where are we going to reach? It's impossible. It's impossible to grow indefinitely, especially if the growth rate is high. Then there will have to be a correction. Then we start blaming each other and calling it stagnation and recession, and we are very, very smart in creating names and vocabulary for any situation that takes place in the world. A slow, gradual, sustainable growth at low rates is the best for the world. Because if one place of the world grows at a phenomenal rate, somewhere else, some other people are suffering.
Yes.
Because the total quantum is one. So when there is a concentration on one side, somebody else is paying the price. Somebody else is paying the bill. It is important for us to create a good economy is to take care of our customers. And this is what, for example, Germany did during the crisis of both Greece and other parts of Europe. They didn't take care of the rest of the European countries just out of their niceness. They are taking care of their customers. Because if countries such as Italy or Greece or others collapse economically, eventually many, many German factories are going to close. So if we are going to work on a global level, we have to work on enhancing education, enhancing healthcare, enhancing awareness, developing skills. If we do that around the world, then we will find that the entire world could grow at a reasonable rate. Yes.
But, sir, the investment that you're talking about, in fact, everybody has talked about one way or the other, it comes from the fruits of growth, does it not? It comes from increasing tax revenues one way or the other. Otherwise, where does the money come from?
No,
I think into better education projects or from Toshiba's training program. It comes from internal profits that have been generated, right?
Well, I think
so you have to grow in order to put the money into
I think if the world spends little less, reduce their military budgets by about 10%, that will be enough to take care of us for the next 10 years.
Well, that's very popular on the whole, but like that's going to happen anytime soon. Maybe we should make it more realistic. Okay, I could see that, Ranjit Singh, you wanted to make a comment on that, no?
Not really, but let me just say that I think the point that was made about the growth, I mean, I don't disagree with that point. I think it's important to be able to look towards ensuring that, we identify, in a sense, create opportunities for more solutions for the population, and at the same time ensure that there is stability, financial stability, because there's a lot of boom and bust that goes on, and I think that's the point that is being made. The effects that we see that happening, and the impact that it causes is quite significant, and that's really what you want to be able to manage. And create a growth trajectory that prevents that sort of major effects arising from that boom and bust periods.
It's very hard to control those market spirits, though, isn't it? They kind of just get going. These booms happen, don't they? Sort of part of the last 300 years of economic growth. Every now and again, a boom suddenly takes over, and you know all about that here in Dubai. Roger, you wanted to answer that point I was making earlier about how do we make sure that the rebalancing actually is not stalled.
Well, one point I wanted to make is simply about an area of the world which hasn't so far this afternoon received much attention. That's to say Africa. Not long ago, it was fashionable to be extremely pessimistic about Africa and to think there was no chance that it would enjoy reasonable rates of economic growth and development. I think the picture on that has changed a fair bit over the last 5 to 10 years, and there are now several African countries which are showing real signs of advance. And if that could continue and be replicated throughout the continent, then there's the answer to your question about drawing people out of poverty. The greatest thing that could happen to achieve that result would be Africa sustaining decent rates of growth for a long time. I think it's actually very possible.
So the sort of necessary conditions you need to break out of this kind of gloomy paradigm is investment. Yes, panelists, you all agree with that? And some kind of political stability too, I guess. I mean, that's the big change in Africa has been that a number of countries have shown better transparency and political stability. Yeah. How about, do we need to change our kind of economic model, which was the starting point of this discussion? Do we need to maybe try and rebalance our economies less in the direction of, say, exports, for instance? A number of countries here have really made their growth on an export strategy, but trade growth as a percentage of GDP growth has halved in the last 6 years. Do we need to be more cognizant of that? Panelists?
May I?
Please.
Of course, there can be various kinds of growth models. Since Toshiba is a manufacturer, we have been deeply involved in manufacturing. From manufacturing point of view, we have to continue to invest for the future. But in order to invest, for the future, we need to make profit. Okay? In order to make profits, there are some environments for competition, global competition, must be also prepared, not only by us, by private enterprise itself, but sometimes by the government, or sometimes between country and country in the form of trade relationships or collaboration. So the things are not so simple, very complicated. But in order to make profit, as I told you already, we need to incessantly create innovations. But innovation, in case of manufacturing, must be supported by the progress of science and technology. So we need to always acknowledge the progress of science and technology properly, so that we can develop the new products by utilizing the new technology, and also commercialize those developments as quickly as possible and introduce those products into the market.
Okay, so I'm going to take that idea that Mr. Nishida has just given us and ask my other panelists, is there one thing in a very complex world that you would put forward, as Mr. Nishida has said, innovate and take to market as fast as possible? Is there one thing that you would say we need to be doing in these more sober economic times to try and build resilience in our organizations, in our countries, however you look at it? Hisham Al-Sharawi.
Yeah, of course, Nishida is very correct, and that is from the supply side. More innovations, more investment in technology, more investment in research and development, reduce costs, improve efficiencies, etc. However, you need a market in order for that to be sustained. So as a manufacturer, you keep on developing, generating an income, you have to take care of the markets where you export these products to. And that is by contributing in the developments of those markets, by creating job opportunities there, a better economy there, which will result in more stability, and that can create a better market for you as a manufacturer. This is how I see it. And education, education, education. If there is no education, this entire innovation of new products is going to fall on its head at some point of time.
Okay.
Because in order to use your latest gadgets, you need educated people to use it.
Okay, market development, education. Roger, sorry to put you on the spot like this, but give us a theme that we can take away from here.
Well, if I may, I'll answer a different question. One which I think gives a different perspective. As well as being pessimistic about the current state of demand, the current conventional wisdom emanating from the United States is also pessimistic about the ideas we've just been talking about. That's to say, the pace of innovation and the speed of diffusion throughout the economy. And there's a widespread view that essentially we've run out of the possibility for technological progress. I utterly reject this hypothesis. It seems to me to be extraordinary, the notion that somehow or other there's a fund of progress that human beings can make and suddenly it's run dry. It seems much more likely to me, indeed, that the opposite would be true with the fruits of modern communication and connectivity. So whatever the next bit of technological progress is, and I don't know any more than anybody else what it is, I suspect that its effects on the world are going to be bigger and more beneficial than anyone can imagine.
Okay, thank you. He's definitely an optimist. Ranjit Singh.
I think from the perspective of innovation, my view is that I think it's important that there are enablers to allow the financing of innovation to occur, which in many cases, in many emerging markets, still remains a challenge. Whether it's the financing for innovation and even financing in SMEs, startups, I think these are areas where, in order to facilitate some of the demands that we're talking about for innovation, you must be able to ensure that the market mechanisms allow this to happen. Take, for instance, the development, the digital disruption that's occurring. That's changing the dynamics quite a great deal. And today, a lot of markets are moving towards, people are looking towards even things like crowdfunding to be able to source, some of the innovation that has been talked about. And so it's important that the paradigms that, drive both from a market regulatory perspective and other perspectives facilitate this innovation. Now, we're creating safe harbors for some of this to take place because some of the intermediation is now non-traditional. Look at the success of Alibaba.
And raise a whole lot of other challenges for the regulators.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Yep. I'm coming towards you, ladies and gentlemen, because I'd like you now to take the opportunity to ask our esteemed panelists some questions. May I have a mic, please? I'm going to have a hand mic and come to this gentleman in the front in a second. And we've got people, hosts and hostesses with mics all the way around the hall. I hope this is on. Please tell us who you are, sir. And thank you for getting us going.
Comment and a question. Roger, the comment. I spent the past 40 years working in Asia, and for 10 of those ran Stanford Research Institute. The president, my mentor, a very prominent technologist. And when asked about that question, he said, very simple, there are more scientists and engineers in school today than have ever existed cumulatively. So it's not a bad starting point for a hypothesis enabled, as you've said. My question is for His Excellency Hisham. The story about Dubai's growth is truly impressive. Having spent that 40 years working in Southeast Asia, partially overlooking the port of Singapore and seeing how fast it's grown, I've also worked in places like Indonesia and seen how hard it's been to make any change. So my question to you is about the political governance and the institutional governance of complex economic growth. We're putting together complicated end-to-end infrastructure projects. The technology, the management, the financing is very, very hard. What can you share with us about the special nature of Dubai's governance and oversight of that economic growth strategy that we might share in Southeast Asia? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. How do you drive it through?
Actually, governance is one of the main pillars of a successful economy. Transparency, accountability, and accessibility is very, very important.
That was a very short answer. Oh, you're going. Keep going.
In order to put in a project, it is simple. But for it to be executed at the right way, at the right time, at the right cost, is very, very, very important. And also to monitor how all the different contracts have been awarded and keep everybody accounted for that. I know that we do not have an ideal system as of now, but we are in the right direction. As a matter of fact, with our smart government, and e-government in the beginning, the mobile government, and the smart government initiatives, we have broken lots of red tape, so we have broken lots of obstacles where certain people in certain spots used to demonstrate and flex their muscles against the rest of the population. But now, with this transparency, with accessibility, those people who used to take advantage of others, or the ones who used to be sitting behind the counters and have everybody who come to them for any kind of service take advantage of them, create and develop and snowball a huge corruption activity has been reduced largely. I think using technology, cutting red tape, making all the doors open to everybody is one of the best things that we have done. I'll just give you one example, and I'm sure the people whom are in the department which I'm talking about, which I'm not going to name, will know about it. Many years ago, Sheikh Mohammed went to one of the departments, and he was looking around and saw one person in his 50s sitting on a sofa, holding a piece of paper and waiting. So he went and asked them, "What are you doing here?" He said, "I have some work here." He said, "Are they serving you?" He said, yes, they have served me very, very, very well. So I said, so what are you doing here? He said, "Sitting down." He said, "No, there is only one piece of paper remaining." He said, "So your work is not finished?" So no, only one paper had remained, and then he kept on investigating why didn't they finish your work. So he said, "No, there is one piece of paper remaining, and that requires the signature of the head of this department, and I'm waiting for it." So he said, "And where is he? Is he not here?" He said, "Yes, he's here, but they told me that he has a meeting." So he goes and looks for that, knocks on the door, opens the door, and finds the person talking on the phone, sipping hot tea and smoking a cigarette. Of course, that was not a very happy scene for that person. He ordered all of the doors of the managers in that department to be removed. He said, "What have you got to hide?" See? Yeah. So simply, you either have some work to do, or if you are busy, let the people see you if you are busy. So that by itself, it's a very small action. It's like what Neil Armstrong said. It's a very small step for a human being, but a large step for mankind. That was a very small step.
Thank you very much. We've got more questions here, so I'm going to move on if you don't mind. Lady, please, tell us who you are.
Yes, I am Dr. Asfour. I am president for the Egyptian Businesswomen Association, and I'm also the chairperson of Human Resource Science and Technology of the African Union, ECOSOC, and the chairperson of the COMESA Business Council. So having many hats, and thanks for all the presentation, I would really want to ask about the role of all the stakeholders, whether the governments, the private sector, and civil society, for bridging the gap between the rich and the poor. Because investment is a fantastic word, but investment in human resources and science technology, I believe, is the key word for real growth and development. Because if we do achieve economic growth on paper, without this economic growth reflected on all sectors of society, including women, youth, grassroots women, rural areas, so it will not really be any economic growth.
Madam, thank you for your question. Ranjit Singh, it's all about inclusive growth, that question, so I'm going to put it to you.
Thank you very much. I think, therein lies the challenge that I was mentioning about. I think part of it really has to be that there has to be a lot more effort, I think, put into areas like you mentioned, diversity, more inclusive participation levels, and for that to occur, I believe that there needs to be a collective change in the ethos that drives business. It must be more than just beyond, profits. It must be, as they say, the 3 Ps around people and the planet. There must be a mechanism also that creates reporting around this, and I believe that here the moves towards integrated reporting, for example, where there is a lot more holistic reporting now taking place, creates an incentive for businesses to report on some of the issues that you're talking about more widely. And I think for this also to create, get more traction, you need to be able to have the buy side begin to push a lot more to look for companies and businesses to provide to address these issues. Because unless they do that, it'll remain very much the same, and the conversations will not go beyond people describing what the problems are. So there needs to be a mechanism for both creating accountability. There's also needs to be a mechanism for a push towards, sending a message out to both the public and private sector that this is really what is being demanded and required today to bridge some of the gaps.
Thank you very much. And we have another question. Please tell us who you are.
Assalamu alaikum. My name is Seema Khan. I am head of major gifts for Islamic Relief UK. I'm here with the MCB delegation, one of the largest delegations from the UK. I look after our corporate relationships for the charity. We are the largest Muslim charity in the world now, and have had the pleasure of meeting with various corporates and governing bodies in the days leading up to this conference. I must admit I've been slightly made uneasy by some of the responses when I ask about corporate social responsibility strategies, etc., in these meetings, and I find they actually don't exist. And that's not unique here. Apparently it's the same in many countries that have developed in the recent booms, and that's used as an excuse. My concern is that during the boom times, people say there was a huge population that was lifted out of poverty. Perhaps that's more so a larger middle class rather than the very, very poor. What we have seen is that actually the gap has widened between the rich and the poor are poorer. There are more under the poverty line. So my concern and
do you have a question for the panel?
The good speaker said we shouldn't worry about this, but I am concerned about the IMF's predictions for the coming years that that's going to get worse. And I would be very keen to understand from the speakers in terms of, what they think can be done to address that issue.
Thank you very much. Roger Bootle, have you an answer for Seema Khan from Islamic Relief?
Have I what, sorry?
Have you an answer?
Have an answer? Yes, of course. I have an answer for everything. It's my job. Now, on this point about inequality and poverty, I think it's very important to distinguish between inequality on the world scale and inequality within individual societies. On the world scale, inequality has massively diminished over recent decades, and it's massively diminished because of the rapid growth of a series of emerging markets, led, of course, by China. And this remains, in my view, the most important source of poverty relief on the world scale. That's to say, the continued rapid growth of poor countries. In my view, long may it continue. Now, within several of the developed countries, including the United States, United Kingdom, several of these countries, it's true that recent years have seen a move against very poor people. The distribution of income has become more unequal, and at the very top of the income distribution, things have gone haywire. I think our societies have got a major problem, our capitalist societies have got a major problem with the level of corporate reward. It's sometimes excused, particularly in America, as being the price you've got to pay for top talent and performance. I think this is complete and utter nonsense. The chairman of Shell a few years ago was paid something like 10 million euros a year, said, I have to tell you, you have to realise I would not have done my job any better if you'd paid me 100 million, and I wouldn't have done it any better had you paid me half of what you paid me. Something has gone very, very wrong at the top of corporations, which has skewed the distribution of income. Equally, people in Western societies without skills, they're suffering a lot because technological progress is diminishing the demand for their services. How do we counteract that? Well, I think we counteract it in two ways. First of all, as has been said over and over again, it's vitally important, the level of education, and giving people the basic ability, not so much the skills of a particular sort, but rather the ability and the willingness to go on learning new skills throughout their life. That's the first thing. And the second thing is to run our economies at a decent level of demand so that the demand for poor people's services is very high. In Europe, we have a disaster with regard to this. Not so much in Germany or my own country, the United Kingdom, but throughout much of the rest of the Eurozone, it's a disaster. 25% unemployment, 50% youth unemployment. That is not God-given. It is possible to cure that. That is it's an economic disaster which has political origins.
Roger, thank you. And our next question comes from Mohammed Abdullah Al-Hamadi, who is the founder and chief executive of InvestSource. Sir.
Very nice. Can you hear me? Yeah. She introduced me very well. In fact, we as InvestSource and as the first Emirati company working as a bridge between the developing world and the wealth residing here in the GCC. We find ourselves in a dilemma. Yet we know that investing in sustainable development relevant sectors such as infrastructure, health, education, and the likes are the way to go. We find that our investors are having, as some of the panelists describe, a myopia. They want the quick return, the low risk. A hotel or a real estate would be more attractive for them than agriculture, education, or even manufacturing. How to resolve this dilemma, knowing that the GCC is one of the last resorts for the world saving?
Very important question. Thank you very much. Your Excellency, Mr. Al-Sharawi.
I think my friend is completely right. Yes, we tend to be very selfish, and selfishness and greed had resulted in the subprime financial crisis that the entire world has suffered from. I think diversification is the solution. We cannot just focus on one activity. We have to focus on many activities simultaneously. If we had in Dubai just focused on one or two activities only, the financial crisis would have eradicated us. But thanks God that all of our eggs were not in one basket, and we didn't have only one basket, we had many baskets. So we have invested in infrastructure, we have invested in ports, we have invested in free zones, we have invested in logistics, we have invested in telecommunication, and we have invested in transportation. In addition, that we have invested to a certain extent, to a lesser extent, but I'm very happy that this is changing, invested now in healthcare and education. So I think the solution to this is diversification and equal weights in different activities.
Thank you. Nishida-san, can I put that question to you as well? From a business point of view, when you have a board has to decide which areas to invest in, it's not always obvious where the best returns are going to be. So Toshiba is investing in healthcare, in some kind of cryptography you were talking about, and smart grids. It's a whole lot of different areas. How are these decisions made? Mr. Nishida?
Yes.
So I was just wondering, from a business point of view...
I couldn't understand what you said. Sorry.
From a business point of view, how does the board justify going into some of the more, hope rather than reality kind of areas?
When it comes to diversification of the businesses, Toshiba is involved in 34 different businesses, from nuclear power business to very small semiconductors. So in that sense, diversification is our company's direction for the future. And we do not want to just focus on very limited or several, businesses only. Because we can contribute to the society or the community by implementing different kinds of businesses purposes. So, but probably the purpose of the business will be different from sector to sector and from private enterprise to enterprise. So I can't say, on the diversification is the best, for running the business itself. But it's really true that we can contribute much more to the community and the society by engaging in various kinds of businesses parallelly.
Thank you very much. And we have a question here. Please tell us who you are, sir.
Assalamu alaikum.
Is it working? Have another go.
Assalamu alaikum, everybody. My name is Saeed Ahmed. I'm here as part of the Muslim Council of Britain delegation, like my colleague over there, Seema. The question, actually I have a comment first. The comment really relates to value creation. I think Hisham earlier on mentioned that the value is one, that somebody has to lose for somebody else to gain. I would like to just challenge that and comment, well, quite frankly, anecdotally regards to Facebook, $200 billion company or so. That value was created from effectively nothing and technological advance. The question I have was actually regarding Nishida-san's comments. Earlier on, he talked about 3 pillars: education, energy, and infrastructure. In the Islamic world, it seems to me that there's an abundant resource of oil, i.e. energy. What is happening behind the scenes with regards to increasing cooperation on the energy front, especially with regards to sustainable resources? Thanks.
Thank you. So that's a very broad question. Who would like to respond to it first? Actually, I'm going to slightly subvert that question, if you don't mind, and that is to say that oil prices, they've really collapsed in the last few months, down by a quarter or so. Is that a challenge, an opportunity for the way ahead? How do our panelists see it? It's a huge exogenous shock, is it not, as economists would say. Roger Bootle.
Well, I hesitate to say that, this in this part of the world, but it's one of the best things that could ever have happened to the world economy. Now, of course, there are going to be particular countries that will suffer. I don't think myself that Dubai, the UAE, is going to find this particularly difficult. It's so strong. Other countries in the region have got such fantastic financial reserves. I'm sure they'll be able to ride out any short-term difficulties. But for the world as a whole, this is a fantastic boon. If you ask yourself why the world went through such a terrible time over the last few years, I think the answer is more complicated, actually, than is commonly given. It's the confluence of the financial crisis and crash with a period of very, very high oil prices. Those two things together. Yes, and commodity prices generally. Those two things together hitting the world economy are what caused this period of great weakness, which, going back again to my comments on the IMF, I think they've got this completely wrong, because the consequences of the world financial crash will gradually be overcome. Commodity prices have fallen quite a long way. Oil prices have fallen a long way. I think, at Capital Economics, we think they're going to stay lower than this, for a considerable time. This is going to transfer incomes from those countries which tend not to spend a high proportion of their income to those that do spend a high proportion of their income. It's going to lower production costs, and the result is this is a great opportunity for the world to grow faster.
Well, on that very positive note, shall we say a big thank you to our panelists? We've had a very entertaining discussion, and it's moved in directions I didn't expect. We're about to take a group photograph, so ladies and gentlemen, can I ask you to just keep your distance for a few seconds while the photographer comes up and photographs the 5 of us. Mr. Nishida, Mr. Al-Sharabi, Roger Bootle, Ranjit Singh, please do join me in the front for a quick photograph. I didn't expect it to be such a positive discussion. Thank you very much, sirs. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
A great pleasure. Ladies and gentlemen, coming up next, I think it's the CEO panel who are going to be looking at how you manage risk in uncertain times. So please do stay for that. It looks like it's going to be a great session. Thank you. Bye-bye.